everybody, welcome to McFarland Minutes, our weekly podcast hosted by Natalie McFarland, me, and founder and president of McFarland Productions, and Scout Foster, our outreach marketing manager. In these episodes, you can expect deleted scenes, in-depth campaign reviews, project highlights, marketing concepts, book reviews, and a deep dive into the creative process at Off Your Rocker Films, and of course, invaluable lessons on mentorship, leadership, and the business of it all. We are so excited to be releasing our episodes every Sunday as your soft launch to Monday. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4, McFarland Minutes, your soft launch to Monday. We are super excited because this week we're bringing on one of our good friends, Matthew Dickson, who has been our financial advisor at McFarland Productions for quite a while. He started advising in 2021, I think. It's a little over 4 years, something like that.
Yeah.
But Matt has been a good friend to us for decades. We've known you forever. So it's been fun to then also get to pull you into to the business as like part of our partnerships and things at McFarland Productions. We mentioned you actually in the last episode, Matt, and how every year we do a river float, and you are the pass down Sunburn Alley. You know, that trolling motor, I'm sure, really helps us out.
I
So
feel
no one
like,
has
I
to
mean, do we have a picture of that anywhere where at some point you can link that in so people can get
we should. Maybe I have one on the GoPro that time I brought the GoPro with
There's
us.
got to be a video
But
or a picture somewhere.
yeah, it's so good. We need to like put up a Venmo sign and you just run up and down Sunburn Alley. It's really a new business venture if we're looking at it. But
Like it.
anyway, as much as I'd love river floating to be the point of this particular episode, what we're really talking about here is financial advising, retirements, how it applies to business, and how it works for both employers and employees and kind of the whole thing. I think that maybe the low-hanging fruit place to start is, Matt, will you introduce yourself and LittleJohn Financial? And then I can ask you some questions about retirement.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of covered it pretty well. LittleJohn Financial is the firm where I'm at, and we're an investment firm that helps people kind of manage their money and make decisions on the best way, for them to invest, and looking at, their unique circumstances and kind of evaluating and making plans and handling investments. We kind of do a lot of different things. We even, dabble in helping people get their estates in order. And so there's a lot that we do. It's a good business. I really enjoy it just because at the end of the day, you get a chance to really help people out, and they often end up, in a lot better spot and feeling a lot more comfortable about their financial future. So it's a pretty rewarding practice, and really, really enjoy what we do.
Yeah. I think all of us, Scout can probably speak to this too. But I feel like all of us feel really lucky to have such a knowledgeable firm, having you as part of our sort of an extension of our team. We've talked a lot about in this podcast about us becoming an extension of others' teams, and we kind of think of you guys as the same way,
You do.
I'm certainly no expert in retirement planning, investing, any of that kind of
Well,
stuff.
it's
So
just
having
so
somebody like
complex,
you with
right?
it.
Because like there's so many different laws and different regulations, and then they go in and they often change stuff, right? Like how much you can contribute to a plan. And so the landscape is always changing. And, if you don't eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, it's really hard to stay current with it or to always like be up to date on what you can and what you can't do.
Scout, does that sound like sound like social media work, or does this
100%.
well, I think we
Yeah,
have
like,
some things in
100%.
and what you guys do, right? Like how you guys are able to do a lot of your marketing work. Like the more I learn about it, it's like, wow, this is a really challenging field that you guys have to navigate, right? Because algorithms are changing, and the way that ads, kind of jump to the top of the order, that's always changing. And so you guys are like fighting to keep up with AI and all the other tools out there that make marketing changing, every single week. It seems like something new comes up. And so,
Literally.
yeah, I feel like you guys are in the same boat where you're always having to adapt to what new thing is coming out.
this podcast is focused on company owners and CMOs of companies. Um, what are some of the different types of retirement plans that those companies can offer?
Right. There's a lot that is available. Even there's even retirement plans that are even, more set up for like an individual person, not just a company.
Mhm,
There's just so many. Like one of the more common ones is obviously like a 401k plan.
mhm,
There's it's pretty flexible, right? And depending on how it's set up, there might even be like a Roth 401k sleeve that employees and employers can use. But it does a lot, right? Like you can even throw in profit sharing potentially
mhm,
into a 401k, which is nice for the owners, right? Because if it's been a really good year, you get to reward the employees with a little bit extra, and then the owner can realize some of that too. So the 401k is a pretty common one, but it is a little bit more complex than some of the others just because of all the legal requirements behind that, and it can be a little bit more expensive just because of how the way, like how things are recorded. So the 401k, that's an option that companies can use. You also have like a couple different types of IRAs, right? Like you have your simple IRA, you have your SEP IRA. Um, and like for a simple IRA, for example, that's often cheaper than a 401k just because the record keeping and stuff. Uh,
mhm,
you're not having to deal with the expense of some of that. And, a lot of it comes down to like how many employees do you have, right? Like if you have less than, I think it's like 100 employees, maybe, you explore the idea of a simple plan just because of the cost savings to get it up and going. But, one of the perks in all of this is I think like targeting employee retention because all the studies show like if your employees are happy and they're not worried about retirement, then they're a lot more productive or likely to stay with the company. And so I think that's one of the big perks. But um, I think I touched on the SEP IRA as well. That was another option.
mhm,
And that, I don't want to go into too much of the details, but like if you're self-employed or a small business owner, that might be something that you can look at. Um, and then if you're like a solo practice, it's just like you running a business, and you can also look at something like a solo 401k if it's just you and you don't have any employees. Um, but that, can allow maybe for some employee and employer contributions. And so
mhm,
it all kind of depends, right? You have to ask yourself a lot of questions like, how much do I realistically plan to put into my retirement plan each year? Right? So if you're trying to only put maybe 4 or 5 thousand dollars in a plan, that's a lot different than if you're trying to put like $20,000 in there every year. And so there's a lot of questions that will ask someone, and it's not like one size fits all. You really need to know like what it is that you're looking for as a business. And then that conversation could kind of start and we can figure out what's best for you.
Business owners, particularly as you're growing, if you're a small startup company, obviously the bigger guys usually have some of this stuff already put into place. But if you're a company that who is like on the verge of, man, do I do this? Do I do some other benefit?
Mhm.
Why should they pick retirement planning? And like what kind of benefits do you see long term, both
Mhm.
for employees, but also
Yeah.
like what is the big why is retirement planning such a big deal, and why is it one that companies should consider early on?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big ones right out of the gate is just tax savings, right? Like, and I think you've probably experienced this yourself as a business owner. It's like, well, when a company starts making, money, the government is on your heels to try and get every dollar that they can. And if you want to put more in your own pocket and less in the government's pocket, at some point you kind of have to look at this and say, wait a minute, should I pay it and should I get should I start paying my future self? And that's really the big question is like, who do I want to pay, me or the government? So tax
Yeah.
savings is a really big one, right?
I feel like every time we pay payroll, I just, like, look at the amount of taxes I have to pull out, and I'm like, "Man, I'd sure like to give that to my employee," you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, this is, like, a way of doing that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
some of these plans are pre-tax, some of these plans are after taxes. Can you
Mhm.
clarify that a little bit, and what does that even mean, speaking of taxes?
Yeah, so
Can you clarify some of that?
yeah, so a lot of the time, what people are really trying to do is they're trying to put money in today, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to lower their taxable income, right? And depending on the plan or how it's structured, you can put some money away and defer your taxes until later, right? And you can lower your income for the year, which kind of rolls back into savings and taxes today. Now, downfall of that is, yeah, as you put money in and it grows, eventually that money has to come out and then you got to pay taxes on it, right? So you're kind of kicking the can down the road. One of the questions you have to ask yourself and try to be realistic with is, am I going to be in a higher tax bracket in the future? Or am I in a higher tax bracket today? And that can kind of help guide some of the decision making around that. But I think the bigger question that you asked in all of this was like, kind of why should the company participate or why even go down this road? Part of it is tax savings, right? Other pieces would be, and I think I mentioned it already, you're kind of boosting some of the morale of your employees, but, you're also really, as a business owner, you're trying to attract top talent, right? And when you can come in and say, hey, come work for me, and you're even going to get a retirement plan here, I feel like as an employer, you're able to have an easier time attracting that talent that you're really looking.
Yeah, I think that internally, we look for ways that we can be people first, right?
Man,
Internally and externally. We talked a little bit in our last episode about some of the ways that we do that through, birthday day off and some other things that we do.
yeah.
But I feel like this was just another one of those things, doing financial planning and having a good financial advisor who can help us with retirement planning with a match
Mhm.
for employees was one of the ways that we did that. Scout, you came on and you participated in the program. What are some of the
Mhm.
questions that maybe you had, or some of the things, the benefits you saw when you realized that there was a retirement plan to participate in, and maybe some questions were common questions for you that maybe Matt could answer for other people?
I think the burning question is, when do you start? Obviously, you guys, I think I had to work with for you guys for a year maybe before I was eligible to
Right.
um start the retirement program, but then I know that I waited uh a little bit longer than the year to take advantage of it. And I think the reason I did that is because I was like, well, I'm getting all of my money right now.
Mhm.
I'm not thinking about myself at retirement. I'm thinking about myself now and how I'm going to pay now,
Right.
not pay myself later. So I think, obviously, I have since changed my way of thinking. Thank you to Natalie and the Little John team. But what should people know about when to start?
That
Like,
is
when
a
should they start?
really, really, really good question. And I would encourage anyone who's like kind of considering when do I start or how much do I start contributing to go find an investment calculator online. There's a lot of free ones. I really like Dave Ramsey's investment calculator. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to put in your age and then how much you're contributing.
Mhm.
And you can put in like a kind of a flat rate of return and then a retirement age, right? Like, when do I want to retire? Do I want to retire at, 60 or do I want to retire at 67? And then you can start to play the numbers, right? And see, based on how much am I putting in and kind of how much am I getting at like at a certain rate of return, what does that equal for me in retirement? And even though it's like a rough number, I think the big takeaway in doing that is you'll learn that like the sooner you start, the easier it is to get that compound growth. And
Mhm.
what a lot of people don't do is, they'll wait till they're 35 or 40 years old to start contributing to retirement. Whereas if they had started at maybe 18 or 20, they get so many more years of that compounding interest to play a role in their accounts that it can be, $1 million+ depending on age contribution amounts. I mean, it can be like a really, really big deal. And so I think, starting early is a big one, right? And just making it a habit. Like you have to just start somewhere, right? Like for the person
Right.
who's like, well, um, this might be kind of financially straining. Um, like if you're in debt, right? Like you have a ton of debt or something, maybe you need to get that taken care of first. But
Mhm.
if you're able to do it, even starting with, $50 a month or something, right? To get started is kind of a good way. Like start smaller than you um like kind of anticipate being an issue because a lot of people will come in like guns ablazing, like I'm going to do $500 a month. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
like you said, things can be tight. Start with a number that feels really easy, right? Something that isn't going to stress you out, and then just keep maybe bumping that up until you've got a healthy contribution rate because, you'll get raises along the way. And so it's easy to kind of add to it a little bit, but just start where you're comfortable. Don't stress yourself out. Just do something.
I think, one of the things that you helped me through, and this comes from me being a 2008 high school graduate,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So, if everybody just like wants to take a minute to maybe mourn the financial situation of 2008,
Right.
I graduated high school, the market crashes, I immediately go into college, not a time to start pulling your college fund.
Mhm.
So I have this little bit of like investment fear built
Yeah.
into me based on what happened there,
Mhm.
not that we've since paid off our student loans and things like that, but man, it sure would have been nice to have a few less of those.
Yeah.
When I started retirement, contributing even, when I was in my early 20s, I was in a position, with a company who did match and had that.
Mhm.
And I can remember then having this conversation, but we had it again when McFarland Productions started our retirement plan with you guys, Matt.
Right.
Um, there's risk levels, right? And like knowing how much risk to take and like how to be invested.
Mhm.
You guys had a great like quiz sort of
Yeah.
situation. Can you walk me through what that looks like and like how do you know? Like what do you
Right.
really should be doing, especially if you're watching the markets today, you
Yeah,
know?
that's a good question too. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to time horizon, right? And that's just a fancy way of saying like how long before you need the money. And so it sounds like in your case, maybe the money was invested heavily in stocks, and then you were gonna need the money, in 6 months or whatever. And then the market is super ill-timed and goes through a really bad correction right before you needed the money. And so, you know, it comes down to like, how long are you gonna be invested for? And if the answer is, well, I'm gonna take the money out in 6 months, like, how much volatility
Maybe
do you
don't be too risky.
yeah, like, should you really, have a bunch of risk involved, or should it be in something, that's a lot more, tame historically? So, I think that's one of the big questions that we'll ask people. It's like, "Well, how long do you plan to be invested?" Because if you're young, right, and you're like, "Well, this is a retirement account, I'm not gonna touch this for the next 30 years." Do you really care if the market drops 10% and you're contributing? Because, I mean, yeah, you might have a couple $1,000s in there and the market rolls over 10% and it's like, well, it sucks. But it's a buying opportunity potentially, right? Where it's like, well, the market's down. I'm putting new money in and it's buying the market as it's down. So I think one of the big questions you have to ask yourself is like, what is the time frame for this investment? Because if you have a really long time, you might be able to withstand the whipsaw of the market and still be able to sleep at night. But if you're 65 years old and you're a year out from retirement, maybe, you want to scale some things back potentially to make it to where you can sleep at night a little bit better.
Yeah, Kevin, this kind of just reminds me of sort of a funny thing, but Kevin, and I don't gamble much, but when we
Mhm.
go to the casino, typically blackjack is like the easy thing to go play a little bit
Right.
on, right? And we have limits. We don't go and play with a ridiculous amount of money,
Yeah.
but Kevin sometimes will play like one hand risky Kevin and one hand is like conservative Kevin,
Hmm.
so he plays like two hands at a time. And the risky Kevin stresses me out.
Really?
But I mean, he's only playing with, I don't know, $10 hands or something like
Right.
that. So it's not like we're really risking that much, but
You're just a little
not
more
that
risk
investing
averse.
is gambling, but
Uh,
I feel like, really where you're getting is like this is really a long-term investment. So
yeah.
don't be afraid of being at the right risk level for your age. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And we always kind of talk like Warren Buffett always says, like, be greedy when others are fearful and be a little leery when everyone is greedy, right? And so that always kind of stuck with me, right? Like the market will go down, the market will go up, it'll go down, it'll go up. The main thing that you don't want to do is you know, make knee-jerk reactions that cause you to like damage your long-term self, right? Uh, so there's a lot of like kind of general things that I could say, like, spend less than you make, right? Like just if you're doing the small things right and you're saving for your future self, like I think that's all just like low hanging fruit where if you just hear it and it sticks with you and you do it, long term, you're probably going to be in a good spot, right?
When Scout and I were planning this episode, and like when it was gonna fall out, so
Mhm.
today we're releasing it on April 13th. Obviously, we've pre-recorded this just a little bit,
Yeah.
but Scout brought up a great point about it being tax day soon.
Hmm.
Scout, do you want to talk some about like what your thought was there and just tax day coming up?
Yeah, so I guess I was mostly just thinking if we or anyone really come into a large or even small tax
Yeah.
return, what should we be thinking about in terms of should we put it in our regular savings account? Should
Hmm.
we invest it somewhere? Should we talk to y'all? Like
Hmm.
um what are some of the things you would look for in a tax return like that
Yeah.
we should possibly do?
That's a really good question. And so I would encourage everyone who's kind of in that situation because there's going to be a lot of people that are facing that here really soon. Um,
Mhm.
one of the things that I really like to see when talking with people and doing financial planning is asking the question of like, do you have a really healthy emergency fund in place where in the event that like say your roof goes bad and you need to replace your entire roof, like, is there money there to do that? Or does that end
Mhm.
up becoming debt? Right. And
Mhm.
so I think, the general kind of rule of thumb is like somewhere between 3 and 6 months of your income uh, saved up in an emergency fund just so that, in the event something happens, you're ready for it. So I would say, analyze that. That might be kind of step number one. Do you have a good emergency fund in place? If you do, then you can kind of start to explore some of the other ways to invest that money, right? And there's so many different ways that you can do it, and it depends on like what your goals are. So like, have you bought a house, right? And so are you already to that point, or are you in this moment where you really want to get out of a rental and buy your first house, so you need a down payment? So maybe it is invested, right? Like maybe you go find some high yield savings or something. Use that as like a little holding account for a down payment on a home. Not that that's advice, but that's like an idea that you could consider.
Mhm.
And then, maybe you already own your house and maybe you have already done really well contributing to your retirement account for the year. there are ways that you can also invest outside of a retirement account, like maybe in a brokerage style account, where you can still get access to the investments that you want, but it's not necessarily tied up in a retirement account. It's just in kind of your own personal account. And that can be a really powerful wealth building tool because you got to think about like how the taxes work in your life, right? And so ordinary income taxes, you have that sleeve of taxation, and then you also have like short-term and long-term capital gains. And sometimes, depending on where you're at on the tax bracket, long-term capital gains might be a more favorable route. And so, like, you really talk to a professional, right? And get one-on-one advice is my best kind of plug right there
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
depending on like where you're at financially, there's so many different routes you can take. Like a Roth IRA might be a good choice because if you put in after-tax money into a Roth, you get to have that grow. And then when you take it in the future at retirement age, you're not going to be taxed on it, right? Um, so that could be a really good option. And then there's also some other benefits to a Roth, right? Like some of that money might be eligible for a down payment on your first home. So there's so many different little
Mhm.
caveats and the little like areas where you could go with that I would say seek professional help. And there's a lot of good ways to kind of uh, potentially grow your money and or be savvy.
You mentioned one of these and, like, I just kinda glommed onto it, and this was one of the ones that when I was texting you kind of the list of where we were thinking about going with this episode that I was like, "Ooh, that one."
Yeah,
So you mentioned, and I'm not gonna get the words in the right order
you're fine.
because I know there's too many words in it, but the high yield savings account.
Uh-huh.
This is something that Kevin and I started a couple of years ago, I think
Yeah.
now, but what's so interesting to me about that is I can remember as a kid, like, people investing into, like, CDs and then, like, you
Mhm.
can't access it forever, but what I liked about the high yield savings, which hopefully that's the right words,
Yeah.
and you can correct me here in a
Yeah.
minute, but, what I liked about that is that, like, let's say you get in a car wreck, your roof caves in, a tree falls on your house, whatever the emergency is, right?
Mhm.
You can still access that money. Can you just explain what that is? Because that was, like, something that I had never heard of prior to
Yeah.
us starting it.
So typically, like when you go to a bank and you loan the bank money directly through like a CD or something like that, oftentimes there's like a term where you have to have the money, like you're agreeing to the terms of like this is a 3-month CD or a 6-month CD. And then if you want your money out early, there's some sort of penalty, right? Well, there are certain ways that you can still go get the same type of interest from the bank without necessarily having a period where the money's locked up for. And that's what you guys were able to get into, right? That you just mentioned. And so it's been nice for you guys because it gives you the flexibility of being able to earn some interest, but not necessarily like be penalized if you need it early for whatever reason. So there are ways to do that. And if someone wants more information on that, they're free to get a hold of us and we can kind of uh, point you in the right direction. But yeah, it's nice to be able to let your money not lose to inflation, right? Because that's one of the ways that you kind of can slide backwards is if your money's just sitting there doing nothing and then everything gets more expensive.
Yeah, feel like passive income is like this, I don't know, catchphrase right now,
Right.
right? And passive income is relative, right? Like, I don't really know that there's any such thing as passive income, but that for at least us is about as close as it gets,
Yeah.
is doing something like that. So yeah, for sure, like reach out to Little John in our opinion, but if you've got somebody local to you, got a financial advisor of your own already, certainly something to chat with them about. I think you can maybe talk to your bank about it too. But okay, I have two more questions
Sure.
for you, Matt.
Go for it.
Second to last one is what is the biggest mistake you see people make when they're investing into retirement accounts and how do they avoid it?
Biggest mistake. I see a lot of mistakes, but one of the ones that really like irks me is when oh man. Well, okay, I'm just gonna blast through a few because I have a lot of little
Okay.
things that I
Yeah.
and one
I love multiple pet peeves. I have
yeah,
them too.
pet peeves, chasing performance, right? Like if you start chasing performance, then you start doing things that can potentially like harm yourself, right? Because by the time you realize that a stock has like done something or the market has moved in this direction, if you try and like always go jump on that, you're oftentimes too late, right? So, um, if you're always just playing the game of more, then it's really hard to like be happy, right? So I think the better plan in all of that is to just say like, what is my actual plan? Like, when do I want to retire? Like, what do I want my lifestyle to look like? And what do I need in order to be able to fund that type of lifestyle? Because if you can answer those questions, right, it's less about, well, I really wanted, 10% returns and I got 9 and I'm mad. Where it's like, well, like, let's look at what you're really trying to do and then make sure that we're on track for that. So chasing performance is a big one. That's kind of a pet peeve. Uh, One thing that I think this isn't really necessarily a pet peeve of someone doing something. Well, it is doing something wrong. I don't know if wrong's the right word. One of the things that you should be cautious of is deferring taxes forever and putting all of your money into like either a traditional 401k or, a- or like a traditional IRA and then wanting to retire early. That's something that I see a lot where someone comes in and they're like, hey, I'm like 55 years old and I've got $8 million in my IRA and I want to retire. And you look at that and you're like, so, you know, well, in order to not access that money and without a penalty, you got to wait till 59 and a half. So how are you going to fund your lifestyle in between now and when you're 59 and a half? And then they realize, well, I didn't actually have any money in just a savings account, or I didn't have any sort of income replacement in between now and then. I don't have a rental or anything. And they did so well. They saved their whole life and they did really, really well. And then they also run into issues when it's time for required minimum distributions, where each year, they have to take money out. And that amount is so big that they have effectively put themselves in a really high tax bracket. And so I've seen people get really frustrated at that, where they didn't actually have a plan. Their plan was just, I'm just going to have a lot of money in my retirement account, and that should solve the problem. They didn't get any planning. They just saved and saved and saved. And then they woke up and they're like, time to retire. And it's like, well, you didn't do any of the pre-plan. So
Yeah, diversified and having a financial advisor that'll help you do it.
yeah, I think there really needs to be a plan, and don't make your plan at the 11th hour.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Scout, do you want to introduce our tagline concept to Matt? And it'll be
Nature.
interesting. I'm excited to hear what Matt thinks about this particular one.
Okay.
I think I'm the most excited to hear Matt's answer to this. I feel like I knew Matt maybe a little more personally first
Mhm.
before I even knew he was a financial advisor, and I don't think I believed it for probably 6 months.
That's awesome.
To be fair, we had like floated the river and like
Right.
You got to see a
played
different side of
This
me.
was
cornhole in
like
the
my time
backyard,
off.
and yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, "Matt, your friend? What?" Anyways. Anyway.
That's
Um, I was talking to Natalie the other day and I said this is like my soft launch to Monday, which really just means how I prepare Sunday nights for the week ahead. A couple examples of that for me personally would to be like wash and dry my hair, make sure the kitchen is cleaned in more professional sense, make sure my inbox is cleaned out and ready for my workload. Maybe seeing what task I didn't wrap up on Friday and what I need to wrap up on Monday. So like making my weekly to-do list.
Hmm.
It can be anything. I don't know what you were thinking yours might be, Natalie, but if you need more examples, Natalie can chime in. But what is your soft launch to Monday?
And that's a really good question. I don't know that it's so soft. It's more of like a jolt. I typically on Monday mornings will get up a little
Mhm.
early and
Mhm.
try and be awake a little bit before the stock market opens because I want to know kind of what the buzz is on the street
Mhm.
before things open because, we're actively managing money. It's not just one of those things where it's like a buy it and forget it. We're reviewing the positions all the time, like every week.
Mhm.
And so I like to try and be in the know. And so I do a lot of reading actually, where it's like, well, what's going on with this stock, that we own? What about that stock? Because I want to be able to know things as they're happening or maybe try and get ahead of it just a touch. So for me, I guess my soft launch is be prepared for the week by being well read.
That's a good
I
one.
like
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah.
Yeah,
good.
I was expecting, I think maybe if we were talking about Sunday, you might say fishing or cleaning up or chasing your little boy around. The
Yeah,
cutest little boy on the planet.
if it's a Sunday, that's a whole different ballgame. That's like try and get the house cleaned up so that you don't start Monday in a frantic cleaning panic and you have no clean dishes to
Right.
cook breakfast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this episode's coming out just after Micah's second birthday. Is that right?
Yes, he turns
Wild.
2 on April 7th, so coming up
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah. Not too far ahead of this episode. So this is maybe an early while we're recording, but belated happy birthday to the world's cutest little boy.
Awesome.
I love that he calls me auntie, you know?
Feel free to plug a photo in there anywhere you see fit if you want to.
We might have to implement the pumpkin pie video that
Do
is
it.
the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life.
I love that. That's a great
Yeah.
idea, Natalie. You know what's actually funny?
um
I gotta tell you this,
what's that?
before this call's over. So, I asked him the other day, I said, "What would you like for your birthday?" I'm like, "Do you want
Ooh.
anything?" And he literally replied with pump pie, which is him trying to say pumpkin pie. He knew what I was asking, like, "What do you want?" And he just said pumpkin pie. It's on his mind.
Maybe pumpkin pie and grip at the same time, you know?
Yes, he loves that little dog.
What is the obsession though with pumpkin pie? Like, is it a new tree or is he loyal to pumpkin pie?
Loyal. He's like his father. Like I used to like when I was really bad with food, I would eat
Mhm.
like the Costco sized pumpkin pie in like 2 to 3 days by myself. And then I would go get
What?
another one and do it again. I was eating like 5 or 6 slices of pumpkin pie a day. It was bad.
What? What? You
We
just love pumpkin
we
pie that much?
yeah, we all have our vice, right?
Year round.
For me, it's
We do,
pumpkin
we
pie.
do.
Yeah, and so it's like,
I
well,
think
think
that's
about it, right?
funny.
It's the only dessert that you don't have to feel guilty eating for breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
That's a good
I
point.
don't know about that.
Hey,
It
it's
is
a
a
I
point.
mean,
vegetable.
it's a vegetable.
It's a
Like
vegetable.
vegetable. I love it.
I think I was
Well,
like,
maybe we'll have to plug we might have to share that little clip of Micah because it's pretty cute. Between that and him trying to call Grip, who is Gip in his language, to give him or give our puppy animal crackers.
yes,
He's a pretty cute little terrorist. Him and the dog together.
there you go.
Um, well, Matt, we're super thankful for you to have come on to the show. We're super excited to be able to, kind of feature some of the people that we call partners,
Mhm,
and people that are part of our extended team, also longtime friends of ours. So, Matt, we appreciate you.
no problem.
How do people reach Little John Financial?
Yeah, easy way to do it, go to the website and just chat us, littlejohnfs.com. You can call or text if you want. The phone number here is 541-375-0898. There's a lot of ways to get a hold of us. We don't charge for a consultation. That's always free. So don't feel intimidated. We're not going to start running the meter on you.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate you. And
Yeah.
to everybody listening, this was episode 4
Yep.
of McFarland Minutes and your soft launch to Monday.
It was fun. Thanks, guys.